Circling the runway, you're clear to land. Welcome to Voices of Legacy, where we discuss and apply the Sunday morning message. I'm here tonight with Nicole, Colleen, and Joe, and my name's Colleen. Welcome, everybody.
Hey. Nice to be here.
All right. Good to see you. Today, we're going to start off with some deep questions. So I hope you're all ready. Joe, we're going to kick it over to you first.
Let's do it.
What question about God or Jesus have you carried for years without really pursuing? And what would it look like to take one serious step toward answering that this week?
Well, I think this kind of plagues a lot of people that have tried to, follow him like on the quotidian daily grind. Like when we try to ask for him for perspective and understanding, does he get tired of the same type of questions that you ask him? Does he get tired of the same type of prayers? I intercede for other people. I'm like, God, why hasn't this worked? Why haven't it's been communicated the right way? And that's really all based on my performance at the end of the day. And it took a lot of introspection. But this past weekend's message was just super enlightening when it came to that when I don't have the control at any point. So,
Colleen, I'm reminded too, when you were saying, Joe, about the prayers and kind of repeating them and Lord, do I need to come back in prayer again? Colleen, you had mentioned something recently, which I'm recalling about sitting in prayer time and waiting for God to speak to you.
Oh, yes.
So that's kind of a little bit of a 180 flip on that idea of what you're talking about, right?
Yeah, the idea that this is a relationship, right? So any other relationship that we have in life, we're going to hope for connection. We're going to want to hear what the other person has to say. We're going to want to hear their perspective. And so that, I feel like so often as Christians, we want to get through the list and tell God what we want to, and I think there was something Pastor Eric said on Sunday about really letting God direct the path and not just ask him to bless the path that we already chose. Yeah.
Yes.
So that kind of idea of like, I might be on this path, but hey, Lord, what do you think about it? What, why did I get here? Because again, could there have been, like he mentioned, unhealed pain? Could there be a lie I believe? I don't know. I mean, deception's deception because it is. You don't know what you don't know. So I think that journey to curiosity with the Lord, there's a lot I don't understand about what I read in the Bible or what I see day to day happening in the world. But I do know he is love. And I do know that he is good. So I have experienced that. I've had my own wins. I'm in a church where we celebrate wins and we get to hear them frequently. But what's going on, Lord, from your perspective? How do you see me in this? How do you see the people I love and care about? What are you still celebrating in the midst of this that I might have failed at? So questions like that, I guess, that stir so that I get to know him more and not just know about him.
Nicole, I think you're living that out in your life this week a little bit with discernment and trusting God for those next steps. Do you want to share a little bit?
Yeah. Going back to the point of what Pastor Eric said about trust isn't waiting until God explains himself, but it's moving because he has proven himself. Going back to Proverbs chapter 3, verse 5, of trusting in the Lord and leaning on your own understanding, and just connecting it, back to, my life. I've always known this verse, but sometimes it's kind of hard to live that verse out, especially when you see other people, kind of on the same trajectory that you want to be. But I've realized and I've known that the Lord has shown me things that, even if I don't necessarily understand why things are happening in a certain way, or why things aren't happening in a certain way, that he still moves. And I love the quote of what is meant for you will not pass you by. And that rejection is redirection. And so I, continuing on with, this week is is something that the Lord is continuing to, reveal to me through his discernment. And I give everything up to the Lord now, just in terms of everything that I do, not just, not just the good things in my life.
Yeah. Wow. We've been talking around this table about discernment, understanding God's direction. Joe, you've mentioned previously about being trained to hear God's voice. And Nicole, you were just saying how, looking at rejection is redirection. Not everybody has that perspective. That's really specific. Joe, can you tell us about how you have learned to be discerning of God's voice?
Yeah, and one thing that I am really thankful of right now that it's in the warmer months, is that I'm able to be outside and take a lot more walks, and especially right after I read his word, because reading of the word is your armor. Reading of the word is your weapon in order to figure out, well, for one thing, to communicate with God, but also your weapon out into the world when it's time to go to war,
Yeah.
And like Colleen was saying, we have that discernment as as the kid of God, as our sons. We are sons and daughters of him. We're not meant to know everything. When I dealt with conflict with my parents, they said to me all the time, you're not supposed to know all the answers, that's what the adult's job is for.
Yeah.
I can attest to that as a teacher too. But one example that I do have that happened frequently in the past few years, that on the summer months, when it's just not a really windy night at all. In fact, it was quite humid too. I was speaking to God about very, very tender and deep topics that were, felt like mortal wounds at the time. And then I would ask him, I would tell him about the situation, because he wants to hear our voice. He wants to hear our concerns. But in that moment when it was just a super calm and still night, I'm asking for, just a little clarity on the situation. I ask him, give me perspective, God, and encouragement on this. I ask him, you want me to do such and such? And then a huge blowing gust of wind happened every single time, as confirmation.
Wow.
When it came to a job situation, when it came to relationships, when it came to insert other thing.
Oh, I kind of really like that,
It was scary, but that was great.
Environmental conditions there. It almost reminds me, as we're talking around the table as well, Daniel, his prayer was just on hold. Holding patterns are released at this point, but sometimes we are on hold. And we continue to be faithful. We continue to immerse ourselves in the word. We continue to pray and seek for God's discernment. And, that is biblical. It's foundational. And I think that if we can measure the experiences across what God's word is informing us, then we know it's true. God's word, like you were saying, Joe. And then from there, it's that relationship, like you said, Colleen. What final thoughts might you all have tonight about this holding patterns being released and, letting the plane land? Because as Pastor Eric was mentioning, when a plane is circling around for too long, it can get dangerous. And so a decision needs to be made too. There's a lot that can happen in that circling time. Colleen, do you have any thoughts on that?
Oh, the simplicity of the next right thing. So, this was an Easter message. There's going to be people that came that may not, may have been visiting, may not normally go to church, but the next right thing of, what is it that God's asking that I can do? How do I engage with his presence? Is that putting on a worship song? Is that listening to, to the Bible on YouVersion? Is that getting into a study? Is that coming back on Sunday? Whatever that looks like, for some people, it's going to be different things. But I just think I liked how he challenged the fact that Pastor Eric challenged our idea of trust. Like there's a lot of things we trust that we don't make any effort whatsoever to dispute, that the light switch is going to turn the lights on, or that the airplane is going to fly to its destination, or our car is going to turn on. It's a lot of things we trust. So why not question, why do I make myself responsible? Why do I think I'm the one who's got to come through for me? What is the lie I'm believing that's keeping me from trusting God truly? Really researching or, allowing to sit with that and get in community. Pastor Eric talked a lot about, living a happy, healthy, purposeful life is connected to meaningful relationships. So, if we don't know anybody, then praying that God brings us the somebody, because we need people, we need other people to walk alongside, to share with. And, I once did something that I know, it was like the process of God healing my heart and helping me to learn to trust. But I actually asked like 5 friends to tell me how they experienced me. Because, sometimes we always think of how we're showing up and failing or whatever. And I finally felt, that God had, touched my heart, healed a lot of wounds enough that I could trust these friends, that they had my best at heart. And so, it was interesting to hear how they see me and how they experience me. And so, I just think having those kind of friends and those relationships are really, really important for us to know who we are, what our gifts are, and how we help build the kingdom with those.
Awesome. And what better way to get into community than to join us here at Legacy Church in Farmington, Connecticut? If you're somewhere around the world listening to this podcast, go ahead and find your own community, but be in community. Make sure you have those relationships. But the biggest relationship, the most fundamental that you need to start with is with God. And ask the hard questions. Be okay to ask those in community with others, because God does not shy away from any of that. Thank you so much for joining us, Nicole, Colleen, Joe. Thank you for your insights today. And join us again next week on Voices of Legacy.
Thanks for listening to Voices of Legacy, where we discuss and apply what we've heard on Sunday mornings. For more information on Legacy Church, follow our socials or go to legacychurchct.org.